Mahlatse Mashua. You're a multifaceted guy. You've done slam poetry with worship. You've been an ambassador for business growth. You have a theology degree, but you're also Siya Kolisi's friend for a very long time, and you're also a managing director for Roc Nation and also former CEO of the Kolisi Foundation. How did you get here? Like, what's the journey, Bushbuck Ridge, to where you are now?
I guess the journey follows what I believe is purpose and intent, whether it's a geographical or the educational. So geographical, born and raised in Bushbuck Ridge.
Yeah.
I did some studies in KZN. That's UKZN. That's where I did my first degree, which was in biochemistry. And then moved to Cape Town. I first lived in the UK, in Oxford actually, where I studied as well. So then coming back to Durban, finally settling down in Cape Town, where I currently live with my wife and our 3 daughters.
You know, there's a step back that we could potentially look at, but that your involvement with Siya and getting into the foundation and his brand.
Siya was injured, and there were question marks around whether he'd play that World Cup because of his injury.
Right. That's a similar story, actually.
That's for this World Cup 4 years later, right? And saying this, and I happened to meet him at that time. It was incredible to be part of that story. Our connection actually was through church. We had been both invited to speak at a conference, and the theme had been around everyday heroes, active citizenry, what everybody can do in their part of the world, to make a positive impact, right? And Siya was one of those who was speaking. I was one of the other speakers we connected there. Obviously, I knew him as one of icons, and we became really good friends. We connected well during that time. Fast forward later, and I must mention this. What was also amazing to see was how during that time, even though I say there were questions about whether he'd play, Rachel was always an important part of the story, because every time I was with Siya, and every time if Siya was to say, if I play, Rachel would say when I play. If Siya said, if we win the World Cup, Rachel would say when. She always had this very strong belief. And so in terms of the stories behind big brands, big names, one of the things we don't actually look at is the people behind that. And behind Siya's great story, there's a Rachel alongside, but also somebody who's central to our story. So I get involved, and Rachel and Siya, after the World Cup, had sat down and said, actually just before the World Cup, on the eve of the World Cup, when we win the World Cup, how do we use this platform? We're going to have an incredible platform. How do we use this platform responsibly? So they began writing down a list of things that they want to see happen. They're involved in different philanthropic initiatives, but they go, let's build an umbrella, bring them together, use our stories, and say where we find these stories of inequality, food insecurity, gender-based violence, sports and education, lack of resources within that, or sporting academic successes. Let's tell better stories. Let's use our resources, our platform, to tell better stories. And so the idea of the Kolisi Foundation is born. They approach me and they say, hey, we're putting together a team of people. We think you can be one of them. Would you be keen to be part of the story? Right. And then that's how I entered into the conversation, where we start working from just a friendship, but also having an organizational connection as well.
So cool. The foundation is set up.
Yeah.
Things get moving. Then Siya's career skyrockets after the World Cup.
Yeah.
When does that storytelling element around Siya's brand begin? And how does that translate into when he signs with Roc Nation? Because I think he signed with Roc Nation in 2020 or
2019.
Or 2019 already.
Yes.
Right.
So that's always been the plan.
Right.
And that was part of the service offering. That Siya, as part of the career management, what we would love to do is, yes, we'll explore commercial opportunities for you, social media, communication, PR communications, PR amplification. But this element of brand building and storytelling being an essential part of that is really, you don't make someone larger than who they are. You're just saying, and let me make sure that the person who's already large is more accessible, or their story is more accessible.
Right.
And so projects like the documentary, the book, were part of the career management plan and strategy from a Roc Nation's perspective with signing Siya. So the foundation as well, because Roc Nation encourages the athletes to be socially responsible athletes as well. We think about our athlete as a human being holistically. And so the documentary starts right then. So Roc Nation Sports International begins the conversations with various partners, investment partners, to say, how can we make the story more accessible through these projects? So already in 2019, that's when the conversations around the documentaries. So it's been a long process and journey with the documentary. And what's interesting about that is because it was so long, and you have, in relative terms, you have somebody who's also growing. Siya will say, I'm very open to learning. And so you see that even when he starts to where he is, there's also the development of Siya Kolisi, the man.
At that point, you were exposed to Roc Nation. You can see what they're doing with Siya, but what's your understanding of the general? And this is essentially my earlier question: the general landscape around athlete representation.
So what I begin to appreciate is the sense of pushing boundaries that I begin to see. Because I'm not in the conversation, but I'm watching it on the side, and I'm seeing the sense of pushing boundaries. Speaking about athletes in ways which maybe for other people was common, but certainly not for me. One example I'll give is to say athletes should not just be things that are or components that are just part of the sports code ecosystem, where you have the governing bodies right on top, and then you've got your whether that's franchises or whatever. Then in there you've got your athletes right at the bottom, like the hierarchical structure, and everything flows from top and down. One of the most interesting conversations was listening to Michael Jonmark, the president of Roc Nation Sports International, speak about how athletes need ownership of this entire thing, and they need to have a voice. They need to be able to shape the sports that they're part of. And it made perfect sense, but I was also quite interested in knowing how this has transpired historically. And I got to see others as well, where maybe there were traditional approaches to management, some of them focusing purely on the field stuff. I got to appreciate conversations about off-the-field career development when agents were so hands-on that became almost like the main focus was to build a business of the athlete, so that they're okay when they hang their boots, so when their time comes. So those are some of the things I was fascinated to see in effect in his life through Roc Nation career management contract.
A question that's often come up in conversations with people: what does Roc Nation actually do in SA?
Roc Nation, the umbrella, is your lifestyle sports entertainment agency. One of the verticals would be sports, that housed and led by Roc Nation Sports International, which in terms is the boutique agency, then with sports talent. Right. There are other capabilities because of its capacity and because of its overall distribution of resources globally, that then positions also Roc Nation Sports International to have what we call consultancy, so to act as a consultant to soccer teams, to leagues, and so forth within the sporting environment.
What does that practically look like? Is it, you sit down with the marketing team of Mamelodi Sundowns and help them figure out ways of amplifying either via social, on the ground activities, marketing campaigns, and so on.
What this agency brings to the table: commercial partnership, social media support, music integration is another important part of it. One of our verticals is music label with artist representation, of course, as a global brand. And we have people like him, DJ Khalid, who we can tell the story of great team like Mamelodi Sundowns' story to him, and vice versa. And what that does is, when he genuinely out of excitement going, I want to put on the shirt, I want to be seen in this show, I want to be associated with this team, I'm going to give a shout out to the team. You now bring a fan base that's maybe following him or music, not necessarily maybe soccer, or not necessarily the team. Now they looking in that direction.
Right.
Something that we've also done is these master classes, where we, again, through our work in various leagues around the world, Europe, US, we consult also, say for instance, with great relationship with the NFL, great relationship with the NBA. We might look at other leagues, other teams that we consult with, and say, hey, can we put together a connection, put together a video call between your team, this team, and have a masterclass exchange on best practices for all the way from business strategy, PR, marketing, whatever it may be that's of interest to you. We can connect teams that would not otherwise connect and share resources and ideas.
All right. The main side of this business is athlete representation. Is there enough in the ecosystem to support athletes better? And what's your guys' strategy in terms of extracting better value for your individual athletes?
Fair to say there are limited resources in certain spaces. And part of the answer to then the question that flows from there is that then we need to look not only in the limited spaces, right? So we're not only looking at the entire, say, Sporting Codes organization to say, the focus is let's bring in sponsors, for the league or for the Sporting Code, which then translates into on-field income. But can we explore partnering these athletes in a less restrictive way, right? Because some teams will restrict, for instance, brands which can partner with individuals, but we can come and challenge it and say, hey, give these guys an opportunity to partner their stories with brands that are saying the same thing as their stories. Let's work to bring these different endorsement deals that are not just boot deals. Boot deals are great. On-field stuff's great, but they are human beings. Jordan Hendrickson loves to cook. Traditionally, you're not going to find, brands that are, making cutlery or in that whatever that category is, right, or food, looking and say, hey, we're going to do something in rugby. But all of a sudden, if you tell the story about Jordan Hendrickson and his passion for cooking and his drive to want to solve the issue or one of the issues of food insecurity, all of a sudden another brand goes, wait a minute, that's what we are about as well. And so that actually, instead of competing for the market share, it grows the pie. And there's so much more. So instead of now thinking, how do we distribute these limited resources between the individuals within and then the organizations, now all of a sudden we have tapped into revenue streams that are much broader, right? And where, people can actually grow.
There's a very interesting agreement which was reached recently, but having done some research into the back end of it, Siya and the Kolisi Foundation have a revenue share. Well, they were part of a seed funding round into the Boss brand.
Yes.
the Boss brand, which has become synonymous with essentially iced tea in this country.
Yes.
It's very clever thinking in the execution of that deal, because it's well known that Siya is moving to France. The whole family is moving to France. They're in France right now for the World Cup. Those types of deals are not all that common in South Africa. Is that essentially where you want to have your athletes be going towards in the future, to say it's not only in this country where you can leverage yourself, but there is other opportunities all over the place? Is that the long-term thinking? And then also before we get there, around this specific Boss deal, it's very clever. How did that conversation come about?
I guess what I can say about the Boss thing.
Right.
Not just because I have been. Well, I have been involved, of course, from day one in negotiating, and that's part of my role is in deals like those, to make sure that we get the best and the most favorable terms financially and other ways for Siya and Rachel. By the way, that's a Siya and Rachel.
Yes. No, let me. I'll be remiss for not mentioning the agreement involves the use of Siya's image, but also it's a Siya and Rachel agreement, not just a Siya Kolisi agreement.
That's right.
And it involves some revenue share for the Siya Kolisi Foundation as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely. So it's in simple terms, in exchange for some deliverables, appearances, marketing support, your lifestyle integration, etc. Of their brand, they will each get, and they do each get some shares in the business. All of the benefits that you've mentioned, and the timing, when to release certain things, how to position certain things, again, is to find brands that are ambitious, that have the right image, because that's also important. There are many brands that want to work with Siya, but we'll say no because they're not the right image, they're not the right fit, or Siya is also not the right fit. But then we know Siya, we know the brand, when we do research on them. All of that is very deliberate. There's a process before we, and they're not just opportunistic. We don't just come alongside them, but we actually sit and say, how are we going to market? How are we going to position? So yes, all of those, there was a privilege to have a front row seat in that sense, speaking back and forth between Brian and Siya and Rachel in that particular deal. What was important also to them, in fact, more than many people realize, more than even the shares, is about the fact that there is an intention for the brand to continue to work with the foundation and say, look, and share of our sales, about a portion of our sales will go to the Kolisi Foundation. So that often becomes a big determining factor, how much brands are willing to work with the foundation for Siya and Rachel. That becomes a big deal.
Yeah.
In those negotiations.
Your sort of runway, a year, 5 years down the line, where do you see on what are your strategic visions for the future of Roc Nation in this country?
How do we work with people with their stories and tell them to make a great impact? That is part of the ongoing strategy. I would like people to think about Roc Nation Sports International going forward as has been, but going forward as a brand that builds, not just extracts value, that creates value. It's not just opportunistic, but creates opportunities for men and women that inspires, not known just for personalities. Although, of course, the people that we work with will be superstars, right? Because of how we will serve them. And the accomplishments will stand out and people will know about them. However, bigger than that, people will know about the networks that we are central in creating, the initiatives, that we are part of, the projects that we push and encourage our athletes to initiate, to be a part of in being socially responsible athletes, to the boundary pushing that we've been doing to do that more, to say, how do we grow the market in certain spaces, to collaborations that we will form, to thought leadership, technology and sports. We are in that conversation, right? We want to continue to lead in that sense, where we can, to share resources, to tell great stories.
What's the sort of expectations around athletes and representations going to pop up in other African countries?
There are places where we'll intentionally stir up the conversation, but there are places where we are being invited and that we then have to consider. But the idea is that we will only do things that and be involved in places where there's an alignment with our strategy, but also where our infrastructure means that we can always deliver excellent services and keep our promises. That's what we also want to be known for, that we keep our promises. So just because there's an opportunity, we don't want to just jump into it because someone sees it. We will also do a capacity assessment. So that's why the conversations that we start with certain businesses or certain leagues or certain teams, it's because we've done that capacity analysis on our side. And so we know when they approach you, and we can work together, we know what resources we will dedicate to that partnership.
Mahlatse, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate the insight, and good luck in your tenure. There's a long way to go. There's a lot of very talented athletes here, and we hope you have we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.